So my contention is, I'll repeat it so that Judy will have it, is that the church is equipped for real life. And that when the early church met, every church Paul wrote a letter to was small. I would propose that every single one of them could fit in a house. And Paul's expectation when you read his letters is that if there's a need in that group, it gets met by the group. And if you don't do that, he says you're still drinking milk, is his phrase. If you don't get along and meet each other's needs, then you do not, he calls it, discern the body of Christ. And he doesn't mean the body of Christ hanging on the cross. He means us. Because now I'm a member of y'all, right? And y'all are members of me. Like it or not, as I said when I said hi, made my announcement, some of y'all are easier to love than others. And some of y'all will find me easier to love, and some of y'all will find me harder to love. That's just the nature of it. But we're connected. And so my proposal is that we are going to, in this group, just look at a small set of conversations and arrangements. And some of them you may already have in place, and we're going to talk about things that aren't your concern, but I promise every single one of you will know someone who needs every single thing we talk about. And it may not be you. But if we are, if we are the elders of the church, then our job as the elders, biblically speaking, elders of the church, is to equip the body to act mature in Christ. That's what elders do. You equip our fellow Christians to live in a mature, beautiful, Christ-like way. Which means that we then equip each other to care for each other and love one another. Come alongside one another. There's I think it's 116 one another passages in the New Testament, and we're supposed to do all of them, but a whole bunch of them are just love one another, which includes the rest. So we tend to be in a culture, we tend to first say we love ourselves in isolation from others, and then we might be mature enough to say we love our family in isolation from other families. So that you take care of your own was what the Fullers said, which there's no biblical argument against taking care of your own or loving yourself. So the challenge isn't do we love ourselves and do we love our family or whoever we feel committed to. The question is, how does that happen? How do we support each other, ourselves, and our family? I call it a family of choice because I work with a lot of families, and I haven't worked with a single family who were all related by blood and marriage. Everyone included some number of people they weren't technically related to. And so I call it a family of choice. But we tend to start with our relatives, at least the ones we can handle. So my proposal in this class is we're going to look at stewardship, and that's the only thing humans have and the only thing Christians agree to. Christians agree to be stewards of their lives. To profess Jesus as Lord is for Jesus to be the Lord of your life, all of it. Which means you're just stewards of the life you're given because you didn't make your life. I didn't make mine. In fact, there's nothing that creates this moment we made. We didn't make anything that creates this moment. You didn't make the life and everything that makes your body live. You didn't make the tables. You didn't make the minerals that were harvested and turned into a metal chair. There's absolutely nothing we made that's ours. So it's not ours. Ownership is an empire power system understanding. There is no ownership in stewardship. You are only stewards. And is it yours to steward? Absolutely. Just like these hands. So far, with the nerve connections I'm maintaining, I get to be steward of my hands. But I didn't make the hands, and when I die, they'll fertilize something if you just lay me on top of the ground. And so that's the way it goes. But anyway, so we're going to look at life, stewardship of life, death, and legacy. All right? And so you have your notebook. Open up in your notebook. And as we start it, you'll see I put the form there that I sent out in an email to have you reflect on it before we came, if you hadn't took the time. But before that, I want to read a passage of Scripture and have a prayer. Jesus is on the cross, dying. On the cross, naked, bleeding, in agony, dying. Jesus' mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene stood near the cross, naked, agony, dying. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, his disciple took her into his home. All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your love and for this home, this garden in which we live. And there's so many ways in which we leave the garden. We grab things that we want to be ours and we do what we want with them, even when it's not in harmony with what you would like us to harvest or use in that way. But that's the way we are. And you came in Jesus Christ and you love us and you've called us to this new life. And so help us to live this new life. And in our time together as a group, help us just to become better able to love the people we choose to love. Ourselves, our family, our neighbors. And help us to create secure, loving homes. In Jesus' name, amen. So here's some rules. Actually guidelines, because if you break the rules, you don't have to leave. So they're not really rules; they're just guidelines. So we'll just try to do the best. We're gonna, if you look at the second page, past that first page, that was what I sent along. It's actually the fourth page in. I should have punched number the pages, but I didn't. It says, we will learn how to reduce vulnerability and fear in times of a health crisis, prepare for the end of life in order to have more of the support we want, and be less of a burden on those we love, and will take powerful steps that will build and pass on our legacies. And I just realized that I didn't copy and paste the section on the guidelines. That's what I was looking for, and I didn't copy and paste it. As I was creating a document for this group from documents from past groups. But anyway, so the guidelines are, we meet here with compassion for everyone. We are going to attempt. I didn't say you could do it all the time. Jesus died in the reality that we don't. But we're going to choose to do our best to have compassion for everyone. We're going to maintain strict confidentiality. So that means that anything said here is only told by the person who said it, unless we all agree to tell everybody about it. Because we might come to some things here and say, hey, tell everybody this realization or this thing. But you don't get to tell anyone else's story but your own. Even when you tell your story, you only get to tell your own story. That's sometimes, a hidden gossip that happens. I'm telling my story, but I'm actually wanting you to know I know his or hers. But and then we're going to communicate with kindness. And one of the things that's not on my list, but is we need to make friends with silence in this group, because we're going to be talking about things that our brains need to process. And if you have an instant answer, then it's usually something you already know. You already have an opinion on, you're already doing something about. If you hear something that causes you to rethink, you're going to have some silence. There's going to have to be, And then, since we're compassionate and kind and trying to really help one another, if what you think is, I object, I disagree, this is a safe place to do that. If you think, well, I got this question, if that might be true, or that, I agree it's true, but connected to that, I have this question, this is a safe place for the question. And so that's what I just wanted to get that on the table. So that leads right to the first page, which is, I would like to invite you, any of you, to share your thoughts related to these, but you do not have to share them out loud. So you can prepare everything for the next time we're together and come and tell us nothing about what you prepared. It'll be fine, because you don't have to perform for me to feel like I'm a success. I'm going to hopefully succeed by just helping you nod your head that you understand what we're talking about. And if we understand, then that's all I can do. And trust me, I try to do more. If you catch me trying to fix people, it's a thing that's built into me. So I don't like doing it when I notice it, but I do it anyway. But anyway, so hear about this. What hopes do you have before we begin? Where you were drawn to the class by something. Tell me what some of those things might be that brought you here.
Death isn't far away.
Good, thank you. Not good that that's not far away, but death isn't far away. I'm going to repeat to make sure Judy can hear, but I have it on where it's recording on that side too, so should catch it. But death is not far away. Thank you.
A better understanding of using, or how to use, my resources. Yeah, how much to give, or how much to keep, or how much to last.
I love, that's a great way to phrase it. What do you give and what do you keep? I'll just give you something that took me a long time to get to, and I haven't arrived where I want to in what I'm about to say. Okay? I believe what I'm about to say, and I'm not where I want to be. We are ponds, lakes, and rivers as stewards. We either are a steward that is a pond, or in Texas they call them tanks, where the water, when it rains, it fills up the low spot, but it never leaves the low spot unless there's a flood. It comes in, it evaporates, cows drink it, whatever, but it doesn't go anywhere. We hoard, and that is anti-Christ behavior. Hoarding is not love your neighbor as you love yourself. So love your neighbor as you love yourself is that we're at least a lake. And the definition I'm using of a lake is water comes in, it fills up the space of the lake, and then water flows out on the other side. We created Jordan Lake, right? We put a dam up that held the water back, but you can go to the Hall River north and the Hall River south. In fact, there's another river that joins there, and I haven't memorized that. What is it?
Cape Fear.
The Cape Fear. So you can go south, and then the two rivers come together. And we could be rivers. But in order for someone with a choice who can say yes and no, and Jesus was clear, make your yes, and your no, your no. And I used to think that meant don't lie, but we already had a commandment for that. So it turns out what he means is go to your secret place, sit with me, sit with the Spirit I give you, seek, seek, seek until it's your yes. And then give your yes. Seek, seek, seek. And when it's your no, say no. Well, I just want you to know, when I was an adolescent, I didn't have that. I said the yes and the no the group I was with wanted me to. Or I said the yes and the no that got me the captain of the football team. You know, and I might have had a better life if I hadn't been captain of the football team. But it doesn't matter. That's my yes and no. So anyway, but a river, if you have choice, a river would have to trust the source. Or you would just go, or you just think, no, I'm going to end up empty because I can't trust the source. So I can't just let everything in my life day by day just flow through, because what if the source isn't? Okay, so I love that. How to be a steward, how to know what to do with what you got, what to keep and what to give. Sorry, I became a preacher there for a minute.
You have to be sorry for it.
Yeah, since 77, so it's just the way it goes. How about it? What else brought you here?
Only thing I wrote down was I just want to get more information about legacy and where to go with that.
Excellent. Anything else?
One of my prayers is, dear God, help me to be a better Christian mother, mother-in-law, grandmother, and sister in Christ. And as I get older, my life is changing, and with these situations, what can I do to become better with my words and with my actions as a Christian?
Wow, that's great, Lydia. Yep. Yeah, I don't get together with church without that goal included, and I'm really glad you put it on the table. That's what we're doing. That's great. Thank you. Anybody else?
I read that I've taken retirement planning courses. I've had several of them during my career.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that Crown Biblical Financial
Yeah,
Study.
I know that well, yeah.
Yeah, I took that in 2012. And I said I've learned about, practiced, and become a believer in stewardship in life. Now that I'm 69, I want to learn more about the death and the legacy part.
Yep. So you've done financial, running, having a family budget, retirement, thinking about life in that sense, but now focusing on what would it mean to be prepared for steward of death and legacy. That's good.
I thought about the fact that Terry and I both have talked a lot about after we're gone, what's going to happen with what we have after we're gone, and I just wonder if it's something that needs to be enhanced. Maybe I haven't thought of some things that I should have thought of. So I thought maybe I would learn something new that we should incorporate into our life.
Right. That's great, Sue. So learning what to incorporate in your life as you reach the end and think about moving beyond. Your financially, in terms of money and property, it's called an estate plan. But one of the things that has been changing in the estate planning culture of professionals who help people with estate plans is they have learned to encourage legacy letters. And we'll talk about that more when we get to that, which I think is lesson 4. But anyway, but they actually call them legacy letters, and so they say, here's a place for you and the loved ones who would gather around after you're gone to know exactly what your intention was in terms of the legacy of your memories and life and the way you've lived and the way you've stewarded money and life. So there's actually a legacy letter, and so that's good.
So it's like the reading of the will, but beyond that too.
Yeah, there's the legal document. Well, again, we're going to talk about this in more detail when we get there later. But there's the legal document that does what has to be done to keep you from having so much expense in the probate process, and to direct your money and resources according to your desires. And that legal document accomplishes that movement of property and money. And then a legacy letter actually is the bigger context and hopes beyond that. And so some people do legacy letters and add to their will. Therefore, this son gets my Martin guitar. I don't clump my Martin guitars in my estate and just say divide them up. That's my legacy. They grew up singing together, and they both play guitar and sing. One's left-handed, so he's not going to get them. But he has left-handed guitars. But anyway, you see what I'm saying? Then a legacy letter could be, and I'm giving the 12 acres over there by the river to so-and-so because da-da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, we have lots of lessons to learn around that, but I'm excited.
Yeah, our daughter gave us a Christmas present. It was a surprise, and she said, well, not to be morbid, but one is Grandpa's story and one is Grandma's story, and then it's like a blank book with writing prompts. And
when I started this work, those didn't exist. And I have a way I'm going to share with you to do it that'll help you do it if you find it hard to do it. But but that's also legacy. My grandmother, my mom's mom, who came on a covered wagon to Arkansas, and when she was a little kid, she wrote her whole biography and was able to get a cousin that did photocopies of pictures, and so you have her, her autobiography, and I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about that I have that, and I can hand that now to my kids and my grandkids and say, you want to know how the Deaton part of our Fuller, Freeman, Hicks, and Deaton, that's the 4 family names that came together in me. How that happened? Well, here's how the Deaton part, but it's not really the Deaton part because she was a Hicks. That's how the Hicks got in. And her name was Goldie Aquila Hicks. Goldie. But Aquila is a male name in the Bible, but I don't think the parent that did it realized it was a male name. But anyway, she was Goldie Aquila. But anyway, that's it. What about a life lesson learned that you'd like others to know? I was just interested if there's any. What's some life lessons? Yeah.
I have just gone, well, my husband and I were both from the Piedmont, and my husband's name, he was called Yates. We moved to Morehead City in 1970, and my husband died in 22. In 23, I sold my home and moved here to be with my younger son. Mm-hmm. And I, in looking back and looking forward, have decided to look upon life as chapters.
Good.
And that's why I'm here today, and that's what I'm hoping to be prepared for in the future.
Seeing life as chapters. Mm-hmm. Yep, there's schools of thought and books about that. That's really cool.
No, and I was able to sell a home and stuff.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Some of it I know where it is, and some of it I have no clue what it is.
Any other wisdoms real quick? Yeah, Sue?
Well, I think we all have life lessons, lots of life lessons, but I think the one that sticks out for me is taking a leap of faith. Because you have to, sometimes something presents itself to you and it's an opportunity. And it's hard to say yes, or I don't know if I can do it. And I've been lucky enough a few times to take that leap of faith, and oh my gosh, it changed my life.
Yeah, that's
maybe
great.
Not a huge way, maybe a big way, but sometimes I just sit back and think, do I take this leap of faith? Can I do it?
Yeah, that's right. Take a leap of faith. That's great.
There'll be bumps in the road,
Yeah.
Exactly.
and those bumps can test your faith.
Exactly.
So me and Debbie's been through a bump
Yeah.
that's really tested my faith, and so that sometimes, you don't completely give it up, but yet you question a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, good. That's good. I don't mean the situation that caused it, but to engage the people in our lives and God with the real question we're asking. When I do pastoral care conversations, I try to find out what the real question we're talking about is. And almost no one starts with the real question. They want to debate a passage of Scripture, but the real question is, the way I understand this, it doesn't fit into the meaning and purpose of my life or whatever. So let's talk about that, what's underneath it. But that's exactly. And our bumps, my brother-in-law's misery at end of life, and my sister-in-law having that right after he dies. If there's somebody up there, juggling who gets what, I don't like them. So,
But we have depended on this church has been with us, and that's one thing I think a lot of people need.
Exactly.
Is a foundation like a church to not give you all the answers, but just sit beside you.
Yeah, and let's preach that sermon for every Sunday for a year. I think that's what we're talking about. Yep.
I think one thing that I've learned is thinking about all the time I've spent worrying about stuff and only, 95% or more of what I spent worrying about didn't happen.
Exactly. Yeah, and when Jesus says, "Worry not, every day has enough trouble of its own," that's so easy to say. That just the words just come out so easy, And then but not worrying is. Eesh. I have this feeling that rivers don't worry. I think lakes worry. Does that make sense?
Do you think rivers are the ones that live in the moment?
I'm confident of it. And if you threatened them with a cross every day of their life, they would still be faithful to who they are that day. If you're going to be my disciple, you must take up your cross daily and follow me. If your faith and my faith is conditioned on the comfort it wins us, the status it wins us, the money it wins us, then we're not rivers. I think Jesus was a river. And I haven't known many rivers. And it may sound heretical, but I've known a couple of rivers that weren't Christian. They lived with equanimity and peace every day of their life, and they rejected the version of Christianity shown to them, and I would say that was the right thing for them to do, because what they understood Christianity to be was not Christ. And so if you reject the false Christ, you're actually probably faithful to the real one, even though you don't have the words. But anyway, rivers don't worry. Being a river is just like, I'll blow my candle out in the morning and I'm a river, I've had my prayer time, done all my stuff and journaled, and I'm just like, here we go. And then my wife interrupts it. I walk downstairs and there she is with an issue. And I go right to lake. I got to keep what I need, and she doesn't get access to it. And she loves me more than anybody on earth. So it's just like that's the way it works. Yeah.
Well, I like contemporary Christian songs, and there's one that is called "The Gospel is Rest," and he says in there about worrying. I don't know if I'm addicted to the worry. And And I've often wondered, is that where I'm at? Because that is a habit that is a
Yeah.
way.
And again, for what it's worth, worry is the ego insisting on being in charge. The egotistical, in the New Testament, Paul calls it flesh, but it's just, self-panic. I have to exist as I am today in my life and body as I am now, or it's awful. And if you take up your cross daily, it's not awful. It is hard to go through. So you sweat blood going to the cross is the pattern we were given, but you still are able to be at the cross. And hanging on the cross, you take care of your mama, like we just read, and you encourage the guy hanging next to you. Yeah, I'm just glad I'm not having to do that, but I think, wouldn't it be nice if there were more people who could be in a tough time still encouraging the people around them, because they don't expect not to have bumps. And that's the gift of what George is saying, is that we do have bumps, and they're real bumps, and we really need to wrestle with them. We don't need to pretend like they didn't happen, and having a Christian community gives us a place where we don't have to pretend when it's a Christian community, because that's where you bear one another's burdens, confess sin to one another, do all the things to one another. I keep turning into a preacher. What are one or more of the things you hope to be remembered for?
Not a big umbrella, but just a good person.
Yeah.
I don't have no records. I don't play basketball or football, so
Right?
so my legacy won't be on statistics. It'll be on works.
Exactly. Be a good person. I love it. That's great. Really good.
I always think a lot about, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Sue.
You hear different comparisons of people. There's givers and there's takers. There's a whole different group of scenarios there, but I just want to be known as a giver.
Good.
Keep it simple.
Yep.
I know her pretty well. She's already there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I was burning out. My first pastorate, we were baptizing more people than the church had ever baptized, and I was miserable every night, staying up late, trying to save the world. And I was burning out. I was burning out. I was just in bad shape. And yet, everybody that saw the church was like, look what George is accomplishing, And my mama finally got through to me. I think she was saying this long before I listened and heard. But she said, George, Jesus died for you, and you're killing yourself. He died for you so you could live. And I was like, that was pretty accurate. And that I had to have a shift, because you actually don't save anybody, right? You don't. You're not. It's not about you. And yet, I felt so responsible. It was not healthy. Well, my guess is that we have one moment it's one thing and one moment it's another, but we have these hopes that people will know us and remember us as, and there's probably more than one thing. Let's look at our outline, and I'm going to review it. Does everybody have a hard stop at 12?
We do today.
Okay, no, that's good.
You're welcome to go on. We just.
Okay, I guess, never mind. I can answer mine.
So these 2 pages here are just an outline of everything we're going to cover. So don't get overwhelmed as I go through this, because we're going to take as much time as needed to get through it. So session 1, we're going to talk about a life compass. That's my way of understanding the way to make decisions. And we'll cover what that is in just a minute. We're going to talk about end of life. The definition I use which is the last two stages are called mutual care and dependent care. We'll talk about that. And then parts of planning. And then legacy, stewardship, what that's about. Then session 2, we'll talk about long-term care and the first folder itself. And you don't worry about not knowing what first folder is, but we'll talk about that. And then session 3, we'll get to estate planning. Session 4, we'll get to funeral planning. And then session 5, we're going to come down to, so therefore, how does this inform stewardship and legacy? But the context of everything we're doing, stewardship in life, death, and legacy. Everything we do is in the context of stewardship and legacy. So think with me about this statement. You cannot decide if you have a legacy and the ripples of your life moving through eternity. You can only decide how to direct your life that creates your legacy and the kind of ripples that ripple out through eternity after you have lived in this stage of our existence. Right? I like, what helps me, I discovered this years and years ago, and I like using it. If you walk into a bathroom, the water in the toilet will be moving. I'm serious.
Say that again. I'm
If you
sorry,
walk-
I'm missing something.
If you walk into a bathroom and you look in the toilet, the water in the toilet will be moving.
I usually listen to make sure it's not still running.
Yeah, that's why
And the smaller the bathroom, the more the water will move. Why would that be? You physicists in here. The room is full. The room is totally full of molecules of every kind, of all various kinds. When you move in, you move them all.
So the smaller the room, yeah,
And
makes sense.
you could call it wind if you felt it, but in actuality, you move the air when you enter any room. But I've been helped. It keeps me more likely to be a steward of my life when I just have a sacred rhythm of when I walk in the bathroom, look at the water, and go, "Okay, George, everybody's watching," and I'm bumping up against and moving with people's lives every moment of my existence. I can't walk into a bathroom where there's no one else without disturbing things.
You mentioned something about ripples. I had never been made aware of that till here about a year ago. I got hooked on a series of books by a minister, Jimmy Deese.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not. And the first book I read was Ripples. And I had never realized how daily you can start ripples. Wherever you are, whoever you meet, you're starting the ripples.
Interesting.
That's just all. Amen.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're to session 1. There won't be as many preludes when we meet moving forward. So that's session 1. You'll see it. It's the one with the purple circle, concentric circles on the right. Life compass. Okay, so life compass is person, people, place. 3 parts. Everybody got the page? Yep. Person, people, and place. So in the late 90s, I started being aware of it, but as of 2001, when my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, we began taking care of our 4 parents at the end of life. And for 13 years, there was somebody dying in our house. Somebody who knew they were at the end of life living with us for 13 years. And during that 13 years, my wife, Tammy, battled advanced cancer. She is alive now, singing in the choir, and I'm very grateful, but she's the 5%. The oncologist's assessment was that people with your type and stage of cancer, you know, can live up to 5 years. And that was in 2004. So 3 years into having someone dying in your house also included my wife. I was preparing to not have a wife, but she survived. And what I realized was, since Tammy and I had the most resources of anybody in our close family, and I'm a preacher, so we're not talking about a rich family, you understand? And since I had the most flexible schedule, I ended up being the care team coordinator. And the majority of the care was given by me. And when we had to pay for something, I just took it out of my retirement account, because no one else had any place to take it. And I never sought and thought that I was actually making Tammy and I less secure today by the choices I was making then. I didn't stop and think that I would want to have my kids have no education debt, which ended up being Tammy and I have an education debt, not them, but I would like to not have education debt. And we finished paying those off, but it was fairly recent. But anyway, and then that we would actually have weddings that we might want to help pay for, and grandchildren who have a line item in our budget. Every grandchild has a line item. Because we have to control ourselves. we don't have enough money not to control it. And so what I did was, I have zero regrets. All right, please hear me. I have no regrets for the choices I made back then. But no one taught me how to not go bankrupt. If you love people and refuse to watch them suffer. If you choose not to love them and let them suffer, you don't have to spend any money. You don't have to interrupt your schedule. And so I began to research, how do you plan for all this? Because as Bill was pointing out, I did Crown, I did Larry Burkett, financial planning, and then ultimately became, the poster child of Dave Ramsey. So what... It wasn't just, can you have enough money, because you save money by someone else taking care of the kids and you're not having to pay for daycare. You save money by having a garden that is more plentiful than the people who own the yard it's in. And there was I had no way. There was no one to blame. Please understand this about everything we're doing. There's no one to blame. We all did what we were taught to do by our culture and our families and circumstance. No one to blame. And I don't regret anything I did. But the truth is, in my life today, you can look at, and I'm being transparent in a way that I hope helps you. But if you open up my retirement account, it's total contributions, a few hundreds of thousands of dollars of contributions that existed back then, and now it's $23,000. And if those hundreds of thousands that we spent taking care of dying people were in the bank and investments and stayed in the investments, do you understand how much that would be now? And so I was looking for a way in which that didn't happen to people like me who had limited income. It's different for people who have so much money they don't have to worry about it. But then not only money, but I've now worked with some really wealthy families, talking with a doctor who's recently disabled, who's building a multi-million-dollar house, and he just wants to have a family that loves each other. And they're not squabbling about having money. they're negotiating how they create the legacy he wants his money to create. So it turns out it applies to everybody, but I didn't know. And every book I found was a individual making a life plan and using people and money to have the life the individual wanted. And then if you married somebody, you would include your spouse or somebody close to you. It was your life. There's a bunch of books, and the books are really good. Like, you wouldn't read the book and think it's not useful and helpful. It's totally useful and helpful. But it doesn't start out with, how do you build a multi-generational legacy of love and mutuality that depends the least amount on the empires of wealth, which I think is what Jesus commissioned the church to do. How do you build it where you're not only secure because you have enough money, you're secure because you are stewards of everything you have. I didn't see any books that did it, so I set out to write a book, and that's what I did. I wrote a book. And you can get the book if you want. And buy direct from me, but I'm truly not trying to sell books. I'm trying to help. So what I decided was, the research shows that the life a human lives, if the human is going to say, if you ask them, do you have a good life? And the human says, yes, I have a good life. Now you've got the research in this, and you can YouTube and watch the quick summaries of the authors of this. But this is the longest study done by Harvard of human life and what it means to have a good life. And they've been doing it since the 1930s, and they've followed the families through multiple generations. Half of the people that started it were going to Harvard, so they were moneyed people, and half were poor people living nearby. And so the people who said they had a good life did not say they had a good life because they had a lot of money, but there is the idea of having enough. The people that had a good life didn't even always have good health. But it turns out that the people who thought they had a good life generally had better health. Now, it's a real question. Did having good health help you have a good life, or did having a good life and not worrying and angst and everything like that help you have a healthier life? They say it's the latter. That having a secure life makes you healthier. And it wasn't that they didn't have tragedy. The families had people that died in the wars that were happening then. You had families that faced, traumas and accidents and everything like that. But they all would, if you said, what do they have in common, these families that say they love their life? And it turns out it's resilient relationships. In fact, they'll tell you stories in here of somebody who you would say, objectively, they had lots of bumps. And why are they saying they have a good life? They're having a good life. In fact, when they tell the stories, the times they knew their life was great was right in the middle of a bump, when they had the community they needed to get through it. And I would say, when were your best times? Well, we've had some good Christmases, or we have the. I'll tell you the worst thing was when my wife was dying, the way my kids and my friends came around me, like, most I ever felt love. And so, and then, if you want the deeply intellectual version, this is a class that's taught at Yale Divinity School. So to the preachers that can afford to go to Yale or have a scholarship to Yale. And they do this class, every student goes through this class called A Life Worth Living, and they look at everything that makes a life worth living, philosophically, deeply, and everything like that. And I'm a nerd, so I like reading this stuff, but my wife won't ever read this book, and she's better at living the Christian life than me. So, and I'm not saying you need to, but I'm just saying they dive into it deeply, thoroughly, and look at it philosophically, all the different schools of philosophy and everything, and they came to the conclusion that a life worth living is indeed relationships. In fact, they say if you want a life worth living at the end, it's not get a better education, it's not make more money. At the end, they say if you want a better life, then do what it takes to build a community of mutual support, a place, a family, a support system in which you have what you need and you love each other. Do that and you'll have a life worth living. So I was finding that when I was doing mine, that these hadn't been written, the study hadn't been finished. And so I came up with person, people, place. And a life compass, the reason I chose compass and I didn't say a life GPS, because how does a GPS work? You're sitting where you are and you say where you want to go and it tells you exactly how to get there. Life is not lived as a GPS. Yeah, that is not the way it works. But if you're going by a compass, you can get up every day and orient to something and decide where you want to go, and orienting to that compass can help you get there from where you are that day or that moment. And so you have to create a compass that you reference so that all the decisions you make that form your legacy and create the ripples are actually lived and going in a way that you choose. And you all choose. Because you are creating ripples as an individual, you're creating ripples as a household, you're creating ripples as neighbors in line at the grocery store. But how do you direct your life? I'm convinced you already have a life compass. I'm convinced that Jesus is saying, if I'm Lord of your life, then I help you form your life compass. How do you define person as a person? Who is George Fuller? My Lord tells me who I am. I figure it out with my Lord. You understand? It's messy. I'm a messy guy. I think too much sometimes and not enough other times, so it makes it kind of rocky. And so, and then people. You have to have a people, and the people are the ones who share life with you. And I call them core relationships, and we're going to look at that in just a minute more deeply. If you notice in the person in the outline there, it says dignity of choice and personal discipleship. I realize that one of the big problems in negotiating life with people is that dignity of choice isn't fully honored. And so people are ordered. The difference between a child who feels like they did what they were told to do and the child that was taught to choose a life they wanted is a big difference. And dignity of choice is right beside person under life compass, if you're looking for where I am in my presentation. And then personal discipleship is as a person. I am a disciple of Christ. And then people, if you see the people one, is covenants and family of choice. And so I call them core relationships, but I found out real quick it's too aspirational to negotiate with all your core relationships. In other words, everybody that matters to you. You don't have time to have all those conversations. So if you go within that, it's your family of choice, and that can be a few or more people. And then within that is a life partner. Or you might write household there. Who's in the household with you? And then yourself. And that whole group, you see that purple banner there, those are all the core relationships. And key relationships on the outside circle there are the people that really are important. The people that are really important but aren't family. And in my book, I call them joy camp, like my fishing buddies. I don't want to do life without my fishing buddies, but they're never going to pay my bills or change my diaper. Maybe one of them might, because he's a nurse. But anyway, and then also what I call thought partners, because some of us might become thought partners, where we actually decide we're going to meet regularly with a cup of coffee or a cigar or whatever we do while we're together, and we're going to think through life. But again, we don't have to pay each other's bills or change each other's diapers. You see what I'm saying? So those are key relationships. They're very important, I wouldn't want my life without them, but they're not family. I don't know. So that's your people. And then place is home and communities. And home, look at my definition of home there. Home is not the structure you sleep in, but the relationships you flourish in. What do you think? Home is not the structure you sleep in, it's the relationships you flourish in. And if you're helping people flourish and they're helping you flourish, you're making a home together. And homes can be, I differentiate between home is done in a homestead that never moves, and you can also have home that's run from a base camp. So I had base camp 19 times before I got out of high school. You understand? And my home also included the family I felt loved me in Arkansas, the friends I would make wherever I am, and some friends that survived the moves. I've only got a few, but I have a few friends that survived the moves that I'm still friends with, even though we actually lived together in Delaware in '72. So not together in the same house, but went to the same high school. So person, people, place. You mind? I'm trying not. This is not to treat you as a child, but to help us have it on the table. Can we just say, what's a compass? Person, people, place. Can you say it with me? Person, people, place. And the reason I want you to have it in your head is when we're talking about any topic, I would like you to think, what's this have to do with myself as a person, the people I'm most committed to, and the home I'm building, where I live and those people I love live. Person, people, place. And I'm convinced that if we follow our life compass, we're happy. I didn't say comfortable, because you can go through some very uncomfortable times. I'm not even saying healthy, because you can have health crisis. I'm not even saying rich. When I went on a mission trip to Brazil, I went a few times to this one community in Brazil, and we helped them for a while. And there was this one family that would host us. And while the 3 years going back and forth, they got a roof. And then doors and then windows in this house where they entertained me. And they were the happiest people I ever met. And we would just be joyful on dirt floors, hoping for a roof one day. And I'm like, there's something that this boy learned going there. They had a home.
And it wasn't the house.
It wasn't the house. But and I loved, one of my favorite moments was they were feeding us, and we had rice and beans, feijoada, and the things that you eat there, and but we had grilled chicken, and I got a piece of grilled chicken, which it was nothing. That was a non-event. I just ate chicken with my feijoada, and I thought I was fine. And this little girl was speaking Portuguese, and I knew a little Portuguese, but I couldn't keep up with her. And she was poking at her mom and saying, blah, 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 and I said to the missionary translator, I was like, what's she saying? She said, she's asking her mom if she can tell you something. I'm like, okay. So she came up there and she said, in Portuguese, you can have another piece. The big news was that this guest gets a second piece of chicken. And I was like, oh, okay. Afterwards, the missionary was saying, well, you understand that that's probably the only time in the last few months they had meat. They can't afford meat. And you were so special, and she got to tell you the good news. You get a second piece of chicken. I'm just saying, you can see I'm still, okay.
Okay, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
And this is minor, but it's bothered me.
Yeah.
So they have no roof. So what did they do when it rained?
They were with all the other people who had roofs.
Oh, okay. They went to someone's home who had a roof.
They were in their cousin's house or their
rain came into this.
Yeah, so it just
enclosure,
ran. The dirt floors would have creeks in them from the rain falling and the water running out the doors.
And what were your beds? What happened to the beds?
So once they had a roof, then the beds.
No, I mean before the roof.
They didn't live in the house until there was a roof. But they gathered there.
You were their guest, but where were you? Where'd you sleep?
No, I was in a hotel.
Oh, you were in a hotel. Okay.
Oh yeah, I was an American, man. You see, and that's part of the dilemma I was creating for myself. Yeah, as part of, it's like I had made some trips to Belize, and we brought some. They got hit by a hurricane, and we went down there and were helping them rebuild after a hurricane. And some people came from North Carolina with us, and we had a benefactor, had a really wealthy businessman who was with us, and he just wrote checks to get whatever we needed. And we were rebuilding some stuff, and the men from the church were all there. Not all of them, but several of them were there that were hosting us, and we were, doing the work. And we were having a meal, and the lady said, "I just think it's so great that all the men in the church took time off to be here." And I was just quiet for a minute, and then I realized they think those guys have jobs. And the reason we were there was this was a really poor place, and those guys who had families didn't have jobs. They were all just surviving together, and we were helping them rebuild because they couldn't afford to rebuild because they didn't have jobs, and they were helping build the places that were their home, and they didn't have jobs. And so then it was like, I would like them to have jobs, But then what do? You see what I'm saying? That it becomes politicized, even. How do you help the people you fall in love with in Belize have jobs? But anyway, that's the ripples that we're not going to talk about all that. So legacy. Legacy is. We will spend time on this as the guide for our stewardship. That's what I write at the top of that page. And legacy is done as a story. So it turns out brain science tells us what the scriptures invite us to do, which is to know that we're part of the story of God's life on earth, right? The capital S story. And our stories, the stories we're living, are part of the story of God's life on earth. And so if we're going to, one way to direct our legacy, brain science says that our prefrontal cortex, right up here, that makes us different than mammals, is that we can create stories that have a past, a present, and a future. And that the reason my dog is always happy when I walk in the room is that's the only thing happening is George is back. And he just wags his whole body because I walked in the room. And if I leave and he knows I'm gone, he goes to sleep. If he hears me coming, he gets excited. And he's not sitting there going, why is he staying away so long? He's not even thinking, I hope one day he comes back. He's just, gone. He's here! and we have a prefrontal cortex where we actually we add meaning to things that existed in the past or the present and future, and we form stories of ourselves and the way the world works, past, present, and future. And the scriptures invite us to enter into a story that has a past, a present, and a future. And so how we author our life story matters. So the life story model, all you do is Google it, and you can find all the people who wrote the books and everything like that. So I'm borrowing from all of them. I'm building it. I made my model simple to deliver it, but I didn't create this thing. I added one little element, just the words I chose. So first, if we're going to be stewards of our lives and create the legacy that God has for us to create, we will have to be the author of our own life. And I'm guessing that you have your own struggles. I have my own about living my own life. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. That's the way Jesus said it. The author of your life. That doesn't mean I'm selfish. To be a giver is to write your life one way. That's the story you're telling. So what is the story I want of my life? My yes, my no is giver. My yes, my life. My yes, my no is mom, grandmom, as Lydia was talking about. Good Christian. What as the author of your life and the author of my life, what do we choose the story to be? And we're writing a story with every moment, right? How we interact this moment is part of the story. So let's just go. Now the plot. What is the plot of your life story, of my life story? I think we actually have, whether we think about it or not, a plot. And the plot is, I have to keep my wife happy, I have to keep my wife happy, I have to keep my wife happy. You know, and then I act accordingly. My legacy is I want my wife to get done and say, he loved me well. He was good at loving me. And then I hear Jesus go, that's not what I was saying. It's part of what I want you to do. But I don't want the plot to be. In fact, I got frustrated at my wife one day and said something that has helped us ever since, but I didn't say it in the best state of spirituality. But what I said was, dear, you just got to face it. I don't get up and light my candle and go into prayer for the God of Tammy. You see, it wasn't really a great moment in my marriage.
What can we say?
And so what I'm saying is that having put that on the table, her response is, of course, you know, and you being where you are, go work on that, George. Work on it, you know. But what's she supposed to say? Not ask for what she wants? I just have to not be so codependent. I think it's a mandate to give her what she wants. And codependent personalities don't have Jesus as Lord unless they make Jesus Lord of their codependent personality, which is what I'm trying to do. So I don't have to be liked by everybody now. But there was a time when I worked really hard to be liked by everybody. And my yes and my no could change based on the room I was in and getting the acceptance that I wanted or the position I wanted or whatever. So plot is really important. What's the plot? How does the overall plot of my life fit into this class? How does the overall plot of my life fit into this moment in the grocery store? And if we stay true to that, we have a good life, right? Because that we then at the end of our life have given and have told the story and created the legacy we chose. But we're not perfect at that. And then there are the characters. Who are the characters in your story? Who are the characters in my story? Characters come in, characters go out. Who are the characters? And how much do they matter? And are these the characters that are close? Or are these the characters that are less often a part of my life? Or Tammy and I were really close to some families. I mean, real close when I was coaching baseball, basketball, and soccer with my sons, you know, because we'd make friends. And then our kids would play the same sports, and I'd be the coach, and we'd just become real close. And I don't know where most of them are now. But if we met at Food Lion, we'd hug and might not leave Food Lion for an hour. Because we were really close, and we did a lot of living together. But they're not there now. They're not the ones I reference. I found a few on Facebook, and we're talking again. But and then there's the backstory. Y'all have a backstory, right? Yep. I was raised by a rageaholic military guy, and it shaped me. And I was raised moving a lot. It shaped me. My best friend in 8th grade is still my best friend. We were godparents to each other's minor children, and we still fish and hunt together and been friends since 8th grade. But most of the people in my life are gone because I moved a lot and met a lot of people, and they're gone. I pastor churches of people who don't stay in touch with me even though we love each other. So there's a backstory, and then there's the storyline. From here, what's the storyline from here? If you read a good novel, you'll wake up in the story when the book starts, and then they will tell you enough backstory for you to know what's going on. but they're not telling you everything in the backstory that isn't related to what's going on. And you could say that somebody who's emotionally and mentally healthy, spiritually mature, lives their life with the backstory needed to do the next thing that fits in the plot. And a lot of us are still slaves to the backstory, including characters that don't serve the plot line we're in. And we serve the characters that don't serve the plot line we're in. And so the storyline moving forward is the question. How's the storyline going? In fact, when you guys, I just want to honor, applaud, celebrate what you said you came to this class for, is to move your storyline directly, right? You see that's what we're talking about. How will the storyline go? And then look at the next phrases, in medias res. So my son Stephen, who's a minister too, and he's in Gastonia, near Charlotte. When I was telling him about this a few years, before I wrote the book, I was putting it all together. I was telling him about this story model, and I told him about the storyline, and he thought I was making it sound too neat. Like you just decide on your plot, you decide on your storyline, then you know what to do. And he said, "Don't forget in medias res, Dad." And I'm like, help me. What's that mean? Well, it turns out if you're a lit major, he was an English lit major, you learn about it in medias res. In fact, what it means is that in the middle of the story, you're reading a book, it gets really messy. And you're not only being told by the author the backstory, but you're being told all the complications and messiness of that character trying to decide what to do next. So it's in the middle of stuff. In fact, he said, Brothers, I don't know if you know the book Brothers Karamazov. It's like 900 pages, and it's one of my son's favorite books, and it's because there's enough in medias res in there for me to believe it. It sounds human, because it's very complex to live a human life, and we regularly fail. So what we need is some places to confess the sins that happen in medias res. We'd have to have a place where people love us even though in medias res happened. George, you're very messy. You make bad decisions. In medias res, grace please. Grace please. That's one of my phrases in life, grace please. And then family of choice, you're at the center, near the author, is the core relationships, those circles of connection. And I'm proposing that we think of it multi-generationally, and not just who's in our core relationships now, but who will marry into it, who will be born into it, and who will arrive as a friend and become family. Or who will you have compassion for and bring into your family? So when Tammy and I have had people live with us who are in transition, going through tough times, and they live with us for a period of time, some of those people we're still in touch with, and some we're not. But there was a time in which if somebody walked in the house and watched us for a week, they'd say they were family. Or why else would they be living with you? And not like that,
So you're saying the family choice is constantly changing, or slowly changing, or?
That varies a lot. Like if you went to my cousin Tim in Donaldson, Arkansas, pretty static. It's pretty much the same. You understand? Right. He's still in Donaldson, Arkansas. Yeah. And if you watched him live his life and go to the pharmacy where he works and come home and go to the woods where he hunts or go to the lake where he fishes, it'd be pretty much the same pattern over a year. If you watch me, his cousin, you think, where's he going? Oh, he made a friend who has a boat on Gaston, and then he made a friend who has a boat and goes to Falls. And he made this other friend, and he's at Baden Lake down near Asheboro. Where's he going fishing? Who's he going fishing with today? But my cousin, I could pretty quickly find you the deer. He kills amazingly big deer. I'm very jealous, and he's a bow hunter like me. But he would be the same. You see, so it's very varied. I moved 19 times, so my family of choice felt and was very different as I moved around. And if we are in charge of the characters in our life story, then we have to be open to the fact that some people come and go. Some people get closer to us and some people get more distant. And that's just part. I don't mean to say just like it's easy and not hard. It's hard, but it's something we have to accept. Yeah, George?
It's multi-generational. Dealing with some of these young people, coming into your, if you marry, you're bringing in a whole host of different people. That's hard to get along.
It is very hard. Yeah, preach.
I mean, it's just a whole.
We're talking about people that we didn't know existed like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and how you and culturally, I think how you integrate people into your family is really a process, and I would encourage you, if you want, just speed read the New Testament, and you'll find that the church was known for how well they did that. There's neither slave nor free, Jew nor Greek, male or it makes me very uncomfortable when I read that. That would mean that if I define myself as whatever one of those you want to say, I define myself as Jew or I define myself as Gentile, I am Gentile, then how do I meet where the love we create together isn't based on you're like me or not like me? And in fact, in 1 Corinthians 11, don't go back and read it slowly, devotionally. 1 Corinthians 11, Paul says, when you get together for communion, for the love feast, for the Sunday meal, and the rich people gather and you separate yourselves in groups when you're taking communion, he says you do not discern the body of Christ. The fact that you're sitting separately while you take communion means you don't even see Jesus here. And he says, and some of you, because of that, have died. Some have died, he says in first. And if you think that means physical death, okay. If you have a God who zaps people, I'm okay with that. And I'm saying it flippantly, so you know I don't think that. I don't think God zaps people. But but if you think that's what he says, that's fine. It's okay, because he's being very serious, whether you think he zaps or not. He's saying some of you are spiritually dead, and I'm telling you how I know some people have become spiritually dead is that they will not have anything to do with people who are different than them. That's how you know you're spiritually dead, is you can't love your enemy, or you can't love your neighbor, or you can't love your family, or you can't love yourself, because you love your neighbor and your enemy as you love yourself. And so that's, and what George is saying is absolutely true. It is very hard. It is very hard. So I'm not even saying you're not, so I'm not saying you're a Christian if you can, you're not a Christian if you don't. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when you know you're totally accepted no matter what's going on in your life, or as Jesus said, when you're the one who's been forgiven $10,000 and someone walks up who needs to be forgiven at $10, you know what to do. Go ahead.
To agree with what you have just said, my husband and I have a saying. We believe that the hardest thing you do is to live with someone. And his saying was, there are only two people perfect in the world, me and thee. And sometimes I worry about thee.
There you go. That's it. I like it. Well, to wrap up, here's what I'd like us to do. The next page, you see priority action list. You're really going to start building this next time, but there may be something. I just put in light print, start life compass conversation with. We'll talk about what a life compass conversation is. Time away to decide my life story might be something you want to do. Just say, what are the main points of my plot, or who are some of the characters I will not exclude from my future story? Who will I like to include, or whatever? Get my will updated. We'll talk about that more. Finish my first folder. But I'm just saying, along the way, my definition of success for you as a teacher would be that there's something you put on this list yourself and accomplish. And if I get done and all of y'all can say, yeah, I put something on the list and finished it, I'll just have me a party. I don't want to decide what's on your list, and I can't help you accomplish it. I can help you have what you need to accomplish it, but actually doing it's the hard thing. And then look at the next is progressive planning list. And that's the things you want to do over time. You can't accomplish them right now, but you want to accomplish them over time. So the progressive planning list might be end of life plan for mom, retirement plan complete, holidays without drama, when to have children. I'm just saying there's a limitless number of things you could put on those lists. And then look at the next page. This is the homework, and we're done. And I don't have to run off, but I want to honor time for those who need to be done on time. I would like you to spend time thinking about these things. Some are an expansion of what you've already been thinking about. The most important things you want to be remembered for. I'm proposing you make at least three. You may want to have more. I want to be known as a good singer and entertainer with music. I like the joys of creating music that people enjoy. But I wouldn't put that at the top. But it is something. I like that people enjoy music when I'm singing. You see what I'm saying? So I want you to think about the things, because I think your rich life isn't I just please God. I think your rich life is I'm pleasing God, and it also includes, like for my wife, that she gets a quilt made for every grandchild. She wants to be remembered as Grammy, and she's going to have a quilt for every one of her grandchildren to snuggle in the rest of their life. She wants to be remembered for that, or she wouldn't be making the quilts. What would it be? What would your list be? Then second, write a few words you choose that describe the plot of your life story. And these are just some prompts that help you think about it. You wanted people to know. I loved whatever I worked for, what you worked for. I built. I enjoyed. And then others. You see, what do you want to be part of that plot that your story tells? And then the last one is start a list of your core relationships, the characters in your life story, or your family of choice. Notice how many numbers are there. My last thing is research was done and asked people, if you had a health crisis, who would show up and help you until you no longer needed help? Think about it. You have a health crisis, you have to have help. Who shows up and stays till you don't need help anymore? Like back in 1990, the average answer was 5 people would show up, and the most common answer was 3.
Say that again.
The average number that people said would show up and help them till they didn't need help was 5.
Average, okay.
But the most common answer was 3. So there were people who said 8, 9, 10, 20.
Okay.
My cousin Tim in Donaldson, if he fell out on the floor, you couldn't fit everybody in the house that would show up. You couldn't. He doesn't have a big house, and there's a lot of people. 393 people close to it would show up. Top population of Donaldson. And in 2018, I think it was, they did the survey again. The average answer was 3, and the most common answer was 0.
Wow. That's
I can see that though, with today's society.
What was the first date that you said for 5 and 3?
Like 1990.
1990.
So 29 years later, it's 3 and 0.
I think a lot of things changed around the pandemic time. It seemed to me like as